I know many people aren't exactly thrilled with the recently released Spider-Man set. Unlike other Universe Beyond sets like Final Fantasy, the art isn't exactly consistent with Magic's history, and many of the mechanics feel underpowered. Still, I've been playing with several cards from the set, and there are a few standout cards that have overperformed in my games. In particular, I want to talk about 5 commons and uncommons from Spider-Man that I think punch well above their weight. Starting at number 1 is Rhino's Rampage. Rhino's Rampage is a 1 mana sorcery spell that costs a hybrid red and green mana. Priced at just 14 cents, Rhino's Rampage reads: target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. It fights target creature an opponent controls. When excess damage is dealt to the creature an opponent controls this way, destroy up to 1 target non-creature artifact with mana value 3 or less. While there are some limitations to keep in mind with Rhino's Rampage, a 2-for-1 removal spell that costs only a single mana is an excellent rate in Commander. And in pretty much every game of Commander, I suspect you should have no problem finding good targets. I mean, even if all you have is a 1/1 token creature, you could still snipe a Mana Dork, Orcish Bowmaster, or Esper Sentinel, while also destroying some Lightning Greaves, a Skull Clamp, a Soul Ring, or if you're really mean, an Artifact Land. The amount of excess damage doesn't matter here, making this extremely easy to use. I think plenty of decks should be interested in this card. Decks built around fighting like Neith of the Dire Hunt or Slinza the Spike Stampede. Enrage decks like Vrondis, Rage of Ancients, or Indoraptor the Perfect Hybrid, and excess damage decks like Rith Liberated Primeval and Marika Brutal Gladiator all come to mind. That said, you do need to be careful. If someone removes your creature in response to the spell, the whole thing will fizzle. Still, for a single mana, this is definitely worth considering. I've already added it to my Rith Liberated Primeval deck, and it is a perfect fit. Next up, let's talk about number 2, Daily Bugle Building. At 19 cents, this is a utility land with a very interesting ability. First, you can tap it to add 1 colorless mana. You can also use it as a filter land to generate 1 mana of any color. Finally, it has the aptly named ability Smear Campaign, which lets you tap this land and pay 1 generic mana to give target legendary creature menace until end of turn. Activate only as a sorcery. I like this card for a couple of reasons. First, being a filter land is always nice. Of course, the real reason to run this land is its last ability, giving a legendary creature menace. While not as powerful as a card like Rogue's Passage, which makes any creature unblockable at instant speed, I think there is a lot of overlap between these two lands. Not to mention, Daily Bugle Building only costs 1 mana to activate, compared to 4 mana for Rogue's Passage. While I do think this could see play in any Voltron deck, I suspect it will be most effective in a deck that simply cares about getting in for combat damage. A Frodo Sauron's Bane deck, for example, already has Pseudo Skulk with the Ring Temps mechanic. Combined with Menace from this land, you're almost definitely getting through for damage. Other commanders that come to mind include Ragavan Nimble Pilferer, Finn the Fangbearer, Hapatra Vizier of Poisons, Nashi Moonsage's Scion, Daxos of Miletus, Shrufus Sproutsire, Inquisitor Eisenhorn, Naam Shai Murad, and the list goes on. Beyond that, there are plenty of cards that actually have Reverse Menace, where they can't be blocked by more than one creature. In this case, Daily Bugle is just an upgraded version of Rogue's Passage. Commanders like Akawali the Seething Tower and Miri Weatherlight Duelist come to mind, as well as cards like Alpha Authority, Vorak Battlehorns, Familiar Ground, Sunder Shaman, Challenger Troll, and more. All of that is to say, I think plenty of decks could take advantage of this card, assuming you don't mind the artwork. Moving on to number 3, Spectacular Tactics. For 7 cents, this 2 mana instant spell costs 1 generic and 1 white mana. It's a modal spell that reads: choose 1. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains hexproof until end of turn. Or destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Modal spells are usually a smart choice in Commander, while they are often slightly overcosted compared to a non-modal counterpart. A card that can fill 2 functions in your deck is almost always worth that extra cost. Spectacular Tactics works as both a pretty good protection spell and a pretty good removal spell. I play Valorous Stance, a comparable card that gives indestructible instead of hexproof in several of my decks, and I'm never sad to have it in hand. I've found that the removal mode of Valorous Stance answers most problematic creatures in Commander, and Spectacular Tactics is no different. Valor's stance currently sees play in over 45,000 decks on EDH Rec. I really like that Spectacular Tactics also gives a +1/+1 counter. This provides an extra level of synergy that really makes this card unique in white. Commanders like Animpakal, who want both +1/+1 counters and a copious amount of protection, should seriously consider adding this card to their list. Other standout commanders include Denry Klin, Editor-in-Chief, Arna Kennerud, Sky Captain, Falco Spara, Pact Weaver, and more. I also think this card is worth comparing to Snakeskin Veil, a popular green protection spell that's listed in almost 180,000 decks on EDH Rec. While 1 mana cheaper, Snakeskin Veil notably lacks a removal mode, and personally I'd rather have the flexibility of Spectacular Tactics. Talking about modal spells, at number 4, I think Amazing Acrobatics is pretty neat. Amazing Acrobatics comes in at 11 cents and costs 1 generic and 2 blue mana. For that, you can choose one or both of this spell's 2 modes. First, counter target spell, or tap 1 or 2 target creatures. Now, obviously, in any deck built around tapping down your opponent's creatures, like a Hilda of the Icy Crown deck, this is an auto-include. But even outside of that strategy, I think this offers some pretty good utility. Using it to counter a spell and tap down 2 potential blockers on the turn before you untap sounds really good to me. Especially if your game plan requires that your creatures connect for combat damage, like say in an Ezio Blade of Vengeance or a Captain Howler Sea Scourge deck. Not to mention, this can also tap down your own creatures, making it a great fit alongside cards like Fallow Sage or Stonybrook Schoolmaster that provide extra value when tapped. Even better, since this spell lets you choose one or both modes, you can use this spell proactively to tap down a creature without countering a spell. I know that's not ideal for 3 mana, but in a pinch, it's that kind of versatility that makes a card like this absolutely worth concluding in my opinion. I personally am going to give this a try in my Belisarius Call deck that I'm currently brewing. Finally, to round out this list, I actually quite like Wild Pack Squad. For a measly 2 cents, this 2/3 human mercenary costs 2 generic and 1 white mana. Despite its mediocre base stats, it does have an interesting ability. At the beginning of combat on your turn, up to 1 target creature gains First Strike and Vigilance until end of turn. Vigilance is a very powerful keyword in Commander. I mean, it's great in any format, but it's even more important to have blockers up in Commander as you could be defending against 3 separate turns of attackers. And while there are several cards that can give all of your creatures vigilance, like Angelic Skirmisher or Brave the Sands, Wild Pack Squad pairs vigilance with First Strike, making for a more powerful attack in any Voltron or Go Tall strategy. I especially like Wild Pack Squad alongside cards like Kutzel, Malamet Exemplar, or Professional Facebreaker. First Strike triggers separate from normal combat damage, meaning you can double trigger these creatures in the right circumstance. First Strike also pairs incredibly well with cards like Permeating Mass, which will turn a damaged creature into a 3/1 before it has a chance to deal combat damage back to the Permeating Mass. Not bad. Of course, this also applies to any creature with Death Touch or Wither. All of this is to say, I think Wild Pack Squad could be sneaky good in the right deck. A couple of commanders that specifically come to mind include Cecil Dark Knight, who has Death Touch and wants to attack, and Agris Koss Eternal Soldier, who can copy Wild Pack Squad's triggered ability to give your entire team both Vigilance and First Strike. You know what? Before we wrap up this video, let's throw in an honorable mention with Aunt May. This 1-drop legendary human creature costs 15 cents and is an interesting twist on a classic life gain card. Aunt May reads, whenever another creature you control enters, you gain 1 life. If it's a spider, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And that's stapled onto an unimpressive 0 power and 2 toughness. Now, the first thought for this card might be to include it in a classic life gain shell or a deck dedicated to casting spiders. But I think this fits best in a type-changing and or changeling typal deck. I mean, incidental life gain is very much underrated in casual Commander, and if your deck is designed to take advantage of cards like Masquid Nexus, Conspiracy, or Arcane Adaptation, Aunt May is a powerhouse card that can give all of your creatures +1/+1 counters while gaining you 10 or more life. In fact, you could even build a mono-white version of this deck with Aunt May as the commander. I may have to look into that. At any rate, what do you think of my list? Do you think you'll give any of these budget cards a try? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching this video.